Hey, oh, it's just me, everybody. It is just I, Mark Bernard, and welcome to another episode of Black Man Beyond, featuring just me, because the other guy's not here. The other guy's off doing Kev stuff, which happens every now and again. You know, you may or may not have been here long enough to know what Kev stuff usually means. I'm not sure if it's my liberty to say what Kev stuff is this time, but yeah, you can put two and two together and try to figure some stuff out. Um, so yeah, it is just I, your friendly neighborhood black man. Um, we are going to talk about some stuff today. We have 5 episodes of the Ahsoka TV show to talk about. There's been a smattering of news, both Star Wars and not. We got an ad we got to read because, of course, there's an ad we got to read. And so I'll be holding down solo today. I don't have a guest unless you count the great and powerful, mystical, wonderful BAMF Man, who will bounce in. Hey, there he is. Hey, JC.
Hello. I gave myself a
Are you
box this time, so I'm
good for
not like
you?
looking up at your chin from a disembodied world below. So I've got a
Uh,
box,
you,
everybody.
you deserve a box, man. It's been a long time. I feel like you've earned yourself some walls.
All right. And I'm not actually in Scum and Villainy right now. So
That's okay. I am also not on a Star Destroyer, so I feel like we are together, not where we pretend to be. Um,
unfortunate for both of us.
I know it would be. I mean, you could do one way easier than I could do the other, but yeah, we're gonna talk about some Star Wars stuff because honestly, there's nobody I'd like to talk about Star Wars stuff with more than JC. What have you been up to these past couple of weeks?
I had the coolest thing happen, and I have to be careful how I talk about this. But I was doing some work at the bar before we opened, and I was trying to get out and trying to get out, and I kept having, you know how projects kind of stack when
Hmm.
you want to leave, you got to somewhere to be, but like one thing leads to the next, leads to the next. So I got caught at the bar, which happens often. And as I was walking out, somebody said, "Hey, the guy who's sitting at the table by himself wants to talk to the owner." Which either means one of two things. It means it's a Fat Man Beyond fan who's at the cantina and wants to talk to me, or it means bad news in general. I was like, okay. So I take a deep breath and I walk over. And I think it's this guy who's sitting by himself in the booth. But as I'm walking towards that guy, who looks very much like a Fat Man Beyond fan, I get stopped by a guy who's probably, mid 80s, and he says like he's 85 years old, like not dressed like he's from the mid 80s, and he goes, "Oh, are you the owner?" And he has a British accent, and I said, "Yeah." And he has this giant portfolio, and he opens it up, and it is the blueprints to the original cantina from Star Wars. And he was like, I designed the bar for Star Wars, and these are my blueprints, which was so crazy cool. Um, and he was like, you know the let's see, these things behind the bar. He's like, do you know what those are? And I was like, well, yes, I do, Mister, who I'm not quite sure is here not to get me in trouble. Those are a Rolls Royce jet engine part. He goes, well, do you know why they're behind the bar? I said, I don't. He said, well, I walked into the prop room at whatever studio we were shooting at, Pinewood, and I saw them lying on the floor. They had a bunch of them. And he said, I'm going to chrome them. And he took one, and they had him chromed, and he drew it into his drawings for the cantina, which was pretty cool. And he went, if next time you guys are in, he went behind the bar and signed ours as like the guy who is responsible for those things hanging there, which was pretty cool. Then it turns out this guy, it's exciting because he designed the most famous bar in all of time, right? I don't think there's a more famous bar than the Cantina bar from the Mos Eisley Cantina. But then he starts talking about working with Charlie Chaplin and Marlon Brando and hanging out with Sophia Loren. And this guy was telling stories. He was there on set the day that Brando was reading his lines off of the baby's head in Superman. Like, how crazy. He was like telling me firsthand accounts of some of this stuff. It was awesome. And
That's amazing.
it's only in Los Angeles and like really only at Scum and Villainy Cantina that weird random stuff like that happens. Uh, where you just like this iconic guy that nobody's
And
heard
I
of.
just and I just love the fact that like he decided one day to roll into your bar. Just like,
Yeah.
I've heard tell about a girl that looks just like the girl that I used to date. Let's see what she's
Yeah.
all
Yeah. Yeah. Derivative. Yeah, it was so that was awesome. It was like the happiest I've been. I sat there and I talked to him for like 2 hours, which everybody's always like, "Oh my god, did you just needle him about Star Wars?" I was like, "This guy has worked with everybody and he has personal stories with all of like old Hollywood." No, I asked him about what was Charlie Chaplin like. I know everything about Star Wars already. What was Charlie Chaplin like? What was Brando like? What was it like
yeah,
being on set of Superman? So yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome.
that's amazing. It's like, did Charlie Chaplin always do the little bun dance with the spoons every time? Was he an asshole? Was there any question like, was he an asshole? Is everybody an asshole?
So what was funny was I guess he worked on the movie that it was like Chaplin wasn't like in it. Chaplin was directing Brando in the movie. I can't remember the name of the movie.
Mm.
I would have failed my film history class now. But he was saying that Brando was complaining to him about Chaplin because Chaplin wanted things very specific. And Brando is like Brando is Brando. He does Brando, you know. Uh and it was driving both of them crazy because they couldn't work with each other. How awesome
That's
is that?
amazing.
Anyway, that's what I've been
Yeah,
up to.
I've heard lots of stories of Brando and the like. I can't remember what movie it is. It's some like gangster movie where he plays the big boss and the big final like scene. I think it's Roy Scheider, maybe is like a detective or a tough guy, and he ends up in Brando's office, and it's like this penthouse office somewhere in like Century City, whatever. And so every scene, like Brando is just like wearing a suit, having the scene. And then Brando would do stuff like he just leaned back in his chair and just sort of like, you know, I've been thinking about what to do with you. And I remember like I had a boss who was like, yeah, because the cue cards are taped to the ceiling, taped to the wall, and there are the stills of like Robert Duvall with cue cards taped to his chest because that's the only way Brando was getting through the scene
Yep.
is if you're wearing the script for him to read it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
To be that fantastic. Although
Yeah.
I suppose it's not all that different than like the actors who wear like the earwigs now, who have like the in-ear
Mhm.
piece that somebody's reading them their lines while the scene is playing out.
Yeah. And I do remember Christopher Reeve, I think he was doing like Letterman, like kind of went hard on Brando
Mm-hmm.
because of that. He was like, listen, we all venerate him, we all understand him, we all like, genuflect when he passes by, but I've never seen a lazier actor than Marlon Brando. We're all doing our jobs. He's reading cue cards off of babies.
Yep.
um, well, that's awesome, man. I'm very very happy for you that you got to glance against greatness and be in the presence of Hollywood history, let alone Star Wars history. That's pretty fantastic.
That was pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I trying to think of what I've done since last we podcasted when I was back in New Jersey. clearly came back to Los Angeles. Had a couple of signing events for a couple of books that I had come out recently. The Messenger, the Legend of Muhammad Ali, the graphic novel that I have out from First Second Publishing. We had a launch party. Yeah, there it is. Woo, pretty. How are you? So pretty. With a launch event at a small bookstore in Pasadena called Octavia's Bookshelf, which was lovely. And then we just had a signing at Collector's Paradise in North Hollywood, who is selling. I saw somebody in the comments mention, "Hey, where can I buy some signed Mark stuff?" Collector's Paradise in both in I think it's Winnetka, Pasadena, North Hollywood, but they have what they call a signature series where I signed a bunch of their stock, which they will then send out if that's how you'd like to get your comic books. So we were signing that. We were signing the Devil's Cut, which is the sort of launch book anthology from Distillery. I've got a 5-page story in there. I think there's 12 others from people like Scott Snyder and Jock and James Tynan and Ram V and Tula Lote and Becky Cloonan and Mark and yeah, it's a murderer's row of talent that I'm thrilled to be quote unquote in business with. But both of those books are on the stands if you're interested and curious. Collector's Paradise will have it. Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash will have it. It's kind of everywhere and anywhere. And so it's been a lot of that. It's been back on the strike line. It's been, still out there. I think it's, on day 136, 137, something like that of the strike. And spirits remain high for lack of an alternative. Like that's what they're going to be.
I feel like with like UPS winning a big win for their drivers. United Auto Workers are about to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think since we last talked, both Marvel and Disney VFX workers have unionized. So I feel like the country is moving in that direction, like it or not.
Hot strike
And,
summer.
and if you don't like it, well, I think we know where you work and who you are. Uh, but yeah, I feel like we're moving in that direction quite a bit.
Yeah, and the auto workers. I mean, the song remains the same. Like the refrain from every labor organization that's striking is just like you guys are making record profits. Um, the hand over fist are making money. Um, Share some of it, not even a lot of it, even just a little bit of it. I mean, the United Auto Workers, the numbers were ridiculous. It was like labor counts for 5% of the operating cost of making a car. And so, like, even if you paid us 50% more than we were paying before, you are not in any way eating into your profits. As a company, you're not passing that on to the consumer at all. In fact, prices have gone up 40% over the last 5 years. And all of that is because people just got greedy. Like, you're paying more for cars than you ever had before, and they're making more money than you ever had before. And labor wasn't getting a piece of it.
So to give people an idea, 5% of a car is labor. In the restaurant industry, you are crushing it if your labor is 25% or less of your profits. Right? So like if you're 25 to 30, that's what a restaurant aims for typically. So like a restaurant is paying workers 5 to 6x more as a percentage of their profits than than a car company.
Yeah, yeah, and so it is just a matter of as always, who's the heroes of the stories that you like to watch? And I bet you it's not Lex Luthor. I bet you it is not the somewhat megalomaniacal head of a giant megalo corporation. Um, because it's hard to make those people seem noble and or heroic because they often aren't.
I I'm going to venture into sports a little bit, but I
Ooh.
worked in sports for a long time, and I worked for the Major League Baseball Players Union, doing video content. And so I got to see, and now Major League Baseball has the best players union that there is. Basketball's gotten close, but
Hmm.
MLB is the gold standard for labor unions. And it was interesting listening and talking to them, especially when, baseball players would talk about going on strike because a lot of people, um, and you'll hear a lot of it about, oh, well, rich Hollywood elites begging for more millions, right? And I would hear that a lot with Major League Baseball players. And the thing is like, if George Steinbrenner is paying Alex Rodriguez $30 million a year, it means that George Steinbrenner is probably making $60 million a year off of Alex Rodriguez's labor. So yes, like you're like, oh, the millionaire baseball players drying their tears with $1 million checks, sure, but like, what about the multi-hundred millionaire owners who are exploiting the labor of the people who are generating 2 to 3, 4 times in baseball what they're paying them? Like
Yeah.
nobody's asking, no baseball players asking for more money than they are generating for the team. And it's the same thing with auto workers, and it's the same thing with Hollywood. It's just, you're not greedy. The people, Lex Luthor is the greedy one.
Yeah. Like it's I think it was Tony Gilroy on, Andor's own Tony Gilroy, who was like, we are the natural resource that they are then selling back to the consumer. And they've been strip mining us for years. And so it's time to get paid our fair share. And honestly, we're not even asking for a fair share. I don't think anybody is. Because a fair share would be like, hey, half would be good. Greta Gerwig probably deserves half of what Barbie grossed because without her, without that cast, without those players, without that script, without the production, and without all of it, that movie doesn't make $1 billion. It just doesn't. So like, how do you quantify what that's worth? But it's worth more than we're getting paid now. So I understand how inconvenient it is. We all do. We all understand how much it hurts people, who both do this job, as writers and actors, and then the people who don't. The people who are, in IATSE, who are grips and lighting techs and sound people and hair and makeup and special effects vendors, everybody. Like everybody's hurting because of the strike. But the strike is not our fault. Like we're not the ones who are still out here. Um, and so like, and we get it, the audience wants the content that it wants when it wants it. And, right now we're in a bit of a drought, and I understand that too. Um, but it is a necessary evil.
It
And it's not being portrayed by us.
I am working on a low budget movie that I have been on for like the last year. So this is a movie that had finished shooting last year. It's not, there's no scabbing or anything going on. Um, but there's been a lot of back and forth with the studio, and we literally had to race to get a bunch of the last stuff done because and this is a big visual effects house, just laid off everybody.
Mhm.
Like everybody. There is nobody working at the visual effects house even to send us a file that we may have forgotten to download. Um, but if you don't do this now, then it's then every writer is going to disappear. Every background actor is going to be 3D rendered, and it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the business needs a floor. It needs a floor upon which you can then build for the future. And all we're now fighting for is a slightly better foundation for that floor. Um, but yeah, so that's what I've been up to. I've been hitting strike lines when I can. I was at the Star Trek United Star Trek Day. I guess it was a week ago or so, which is always fun. Like it's always fun to get to see previous colleagues, to get to see friggin' LeVar Burton, to get to glance at George Takei as he's passing by. Um, I'm gonna hit. There's a Battlestar Galactica picket line special strike day next week. What is today? Is the 16th? So it's the 21st at Universal. So I'm gonna roll through there. Um, it's just always it's fun. Like, it's a way to add some levity and some lightness to what is ultimately the Wheel of Pain from Conan the Barbarian. You're just walking in a circle, carving grooves in the cement. Um, Hopefully there are friends that you can walk with. Hopefully there are people that you know and people that you haven't gotten to meet yet. But it can be, especially in the Southern California heat, somewhat uh, somewhat deadening, both physically and soulfully.
What so when you do a Battlestar Galactica or a Star Trek and they promote those things, if
Mm-hmm.
you're Trisha Helfer or Katie Sackhoff or Edward James Olmos, are you like is it a like do they get accosted by fans? Are they signing autographs or is that part of it because you're trying to get people out there and show them what's going on and call attention to it? Or are people pretty chill and they let them get their 20,000 steps?
I think it's a bit of both. Like when I've done sort of Star Trek Day, when I've done it was a big superhero day at Warner Brothers, back in what was that? It was like June. Um, it's not a rally per se, like there's no speeches, although Edward James almost does love to give a speech, so you can never really hold him too far from a mic. But it's, stopping for selfies, it's taking the pictures, it's less autograph signing because I think everybody kind of realizes that that's not entirely the purpose of this. Um, but it's like, all right, I'm gonna walk with the Admiral for a couple of loops, and I'm gonna like say hello to President Roslin for a loop or two. I'm gonna say, oh, Lucifer's over there. I'm gonna hang out with Lucifer and just say hello. Um, they're incredibly open, super kind because they also realize, these are fans. These helped, me get where I am. They helped support the show. They helped keep us on the air for however many seasons we were on the air. Like I think everybody's gracious and shows the gratitude and don't be an asshole. It's always the lesson from one of those things. Like, don't be the person who's just like a little too much. And we all know what a little too much feels like. Um, but those events, they're always kind of cool. They're always kind of chill, and I think everybody just loves to talk about people who love this stuff. And it turns out that the actors who were on those shows for 4 and 5 years love it too. So they are totally happy to share and spread some of that love. So if you're in LA and you're a nerd and you want to come to like the Battlestar Picket Day, it's next Thursday from 9 to 12 at Universal. Just be walking around, you guys. And I'm like a tangential member of the family, so I get to sit at the kids' table.
I always feel like I was like a little opportunistic because I was like, man, I could go and hand out free blue milks to all the Battlestar Galactica people right down the street from Scum and Villainy.
You very much could. Like I've seen more than one like, hey, Scientology's handing out water on the line. And they
Oh,
don't tell
really?
you from the jump that they're Scientology, but
But then
like
they're like, hold these things. Have you read Dianetics?
you have to take 2 bottles of water. You can't just take one. Um, but like there are definitely people who are, marketing on the line. There are definitely people who are, I'm not going to say passing out scripts because nobody wants that. Everybody realized that that's kind of shitty. There are not actors with headshots just like littering the picket lines with them. But there are companies who will happily be like, hey, we're a VFX vendor and we just bought water. Um, here you go. Here you go. Here's some ice cream. Please take some of this ice cream. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world for you to be like Mr. Blue Milk guy, like a good humor, like one of those roll up good humor things, just
Yeah.
milk.
With one of these guys hanging off of it, it comes up and over.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. If you had a like a rolling R2 stroller kind of thing
Oh
that you
my
could just pop the
gosh.
lid and just pull blue milks out of it,
Especially doing that in front of Disney.
great. Be perfect. All right, so we're gonna get into some news. We're gonna get into some Ahsoka, but before we do any of that,
Oh
we
yeah.
have to give some love. We have to give some love to the good people at our one and only sponsor today, the folks at Manscaped. So yes, once again, Manscaped supports Fat Man Beyond and Black Man Beyond so much they provided an exclusive offer for our listeners. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FATMAN20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code FATMAN20 at checkout. Feel like yourself again and take charge of your life with Manscaped. Now, listen, we have talked about Manscaped for a good long while. They've been a loyal sponsor of this podcast, every incarnation of it. Um, I'm a Manscaped customer. I'm a Manscaped user. I use it less for my balls and more for my big ball up here. And I use it to trim up the beard when it gets a little out of control. But hey, if you gotta tame your crotch hair, go for it. Manscaped is the way to get it done. September is here, and I want to take a second to talk about self-care. When it comes to making an impression, proper grooming is essential to looking and feeling your best when you walk into a room. That's why the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped, are committed to helping men around the world walk and talk with some swagger this season, with the best grooming tools on the market. Join the 9 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and enjoy this offer, 20% off plus free shipping, with the code FATMAN20 at Manscaped. Don't neglect your beautiful self and get right this summer with Manscaped. Listen, for the sleekest version of yourself, Manscaped has you covered from head to toe, starting with their brand new beard hedger trimmer. That's the one I use. With one guard and 20 adjustable lengths, this device is the perfect travel companion fit to take care of your mane wherever you are. Next in line, you can forget their signature performance package 4.0. Included in this ultimate grooming bundle is a star of the show, the Lawnmower 4.0, equipped with skin-safe technology to minimize nicks and cuts in all your sensitive zones. Also included is a Crop Preserver groin deodorant and Crop Reviver groin spray. Powder and spray, deodorant spray, and have a great day. I can tell you from experience, this has taken my confidence in the bedroom to a whole new level. Asterisk. Want something you don't mind showing this special someone in your life? Look no further than Manscaped's Boxers 2.0. These are without a doubt the best boxers for men of all ages. I can confidently say I'll never go back to cotton boxer briefs after wearing these. So once again, Manscaped supports Fat Man Beyond, Black Man Beyond, the entire Beyond family. So much so that they provide an exclusive offer for the listeners, 20% off plus free shipping with the code FATMAN20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code FATMAN20 at checkout. Feel like yourself again and take charge of your life with Manscaped. And we thank them for sponsoring this episode.
I
We
might
did
need to
it.
need to get the beard one. I've been using
Yeah.
the ball one on my head, and it works really well. I have Jen do it, and she discovered she has been going down, and she discovered if you shave up, she's like, oh my gosh, it gets so much closer to your head. I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, I'm gonna start doing it that way. But now I wonder if I should get the beard one and get rid of those Gillette 4-blade
Mhm.
things that go bad so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how close the beard one will get to the skin.
Uh,
Um, that would be the only caveat. But hell, if I can get it and give it a try, man. It was a saving grace for me during the pandemic. I mean, we talked about that a while. Like I wasn't going to the barbershop and I was not going to grow like the Frederick Douglass afro. And so I turned to my Manscaped gear, and that kept me nice and tight. So yeah, man, give it a go. You could do wrong. You could go far worse, awry, than giving Manscaped a go. All right,
do we
man.
want to bounce over to Ahsoka? People are screaming in chat about it.
Let's hit Ahsoka. Let's hit Ahsoka real quick. Or maybe not real quick. Maybe we'll take a good long while and talk about Ahsoka.
Are you
Um,
caught up?
I'm 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 caught up. I've seen all the way through five. Um, Five it seemed to have the most worth talking about in it. I can't say that I've been overwhelmingly soup to nuts thrilled with this show. I think some of it is the pace with which it's telling its story, which is somewhat glacial. Some of it is, again, we talked about it at the jump, the lack of an on-ramp for people who were not dyed in the wool Clone Wars and Rebels fans. Um, some of it is just kind of performance. Everybody seems to be, you know, at a 2 when, hey, we could use a 6 or a 7 right about now. Um, but episode 5 seems to be the one where they were like, you know what? Even if you hate this show, there's going to be something in it for you. Um, and there very much was something in it for me, and I did not expect. I mean, listen, we all know that Dave Filoni has been doing the kind of reclaiming the prequels has been the grand design of kind of the last 20 years of his life. Like, I know you hate these, I think they're great, and let me show you the ways in which I think that they're great. And I think reintroducing and replatforming and recontextualizing Anakin Skywalker, and not just Anakin Skywalker, but Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, seems to be the icing on that particular cake. And yeah, like I get it, like in all the ways that I didn't get it in the prequels, some of which because George directed Hayden relatively awfully. That character was not well written, that was was not well counseled or guided, and not well performed either. But watching the weird kind of what if version of Anakin Skywalker, like what if he won the fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi? What if this is what Darth Vader was supposed to be? Um, is kind of intoxicating. Like watching that stuff was like, oh shit. Now, okay, we've earned it now. Like, suddenly all of this kind of makes sense. Because when I mean, and we'll talk about the context for it. And yes, spoilers. We're going to spoil quite a bit of episode five. We won't be spoiling before episode five because, frankly, I don't remember what happened. Episodes one through four.
Yeah, I did a podcast for the Nerdtropolis outlet. They asked me to be on and talk about Ahsoka. And I went pretty hard. I went much harder on their podcast than I did on this one. For episodes 1 through 4, which and you hit on it. It's the joke about the original Star Wars trilogy is that George's only direction was faster, more intense, right? That's the joke. It's almost like you can't say faster, more intense without hearing Harrison Ford mocking George Lucas. And it's like this show has looked like Star Wars, but it forgot that faster, more intense is the direction of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was almost like, let's do Kurosawa, but like without like consequence, without any energy, without any like my biggest issue in episode 4 was, Ahsoka is swinging her lightsaber on the ship, but right before that, their shields are knocked out. Now, if we've all seen Star Wars, if your shields gets knocked out, like one more hit and we're done for, right? How many times has C-3PO said that? And Ahsoka and Sabine are just like, well, all right, I guess we're the main characters of this show. I'm going to go out and take care of this while you fly the ship. And Sabine's like, you're going to go outside? And Ahsoka's like, yes. And then it's like the most low energy lightsaber destroying spaceships thing I've ever seen. That was like episodes 1 through 4 for me. I was like, what is going on? And then episode 5 happened. And within 90 seconds of episode 5, I was like, this is a different director than did the last 3. I could see it in the way that the camera was directed. And I think my guess of what happened, and you have directed as well, is that I think in Dave Filoni as the showrunner's head, and he directed episode 1 and he directed episode 5, I almost feel like they were they had directed Rosario because I've worked on movies with Rosario and you've been around Rosario. Rosario can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost feel as if she was directed to be flat. Because in episode 5, they were like, you're trying to get over this hurdle. And in episode 5, after you battle Anakin, you're going to get over the hurdle and you're going to be Ahsoka again. And I think going into those episodes, it's probably a really strong idea, and on the page, it probably read really well. And then you shot 4 episodes of a series where everybody's bored. And then when she is like, okay, you've turned the corner, your character's turned the corner. Like, to me, I saw Ahsoka, the Ahsoka from Rebels, for the first time in episode 5. I can't talk and read the chat at the same time, so I might be getting flamed. But that was the first time I saw Ahsoka in this show. That was the first time I saw Hera in this show. You know, I rubbed up against the fact that, like, as somebody who watched Rebels, I feel like Hera is getting poked by Carson Teva, and she wouldn't have, like, magically started hearing lightsaber fights. Um I think she probably would have been the type of person who puts family first, and she would have been like, I trust my son. He has special abilities. We are going to trust him. And you are going to trust me because I'm the general. Rather than, like, all of a sudden now everybody in the entire galaxy can access the Force. I don't know. I thought that was a little weird.
I mean,
Um,
I think everything that was not Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano was not very good. Um, because there's no suspense to it, right? Like, I know they're going to find Ahsoka. It is a foregone conclusion. So why do we have to spend 4 and 5 scenes reconnecting with this team that's absolutely going to find this woman? Because they're not going to. So how do we add some conflict to that? And to your point, there kind of is none. Like, if you had told me that either, like, Carson and Hera were at loggerheads, and Carson's like, we gotta go, like, for real, we're leaving. I'm not losing. I'm not busting my command. I'm not getting knocked down to fucking, like, squeegee guy and the X-wing base because you got to hang out and find, your lost friend. Or I'm not sure I believe my son is special at all. Like, I think he's a great kid. He claims to hear voices. I have no proof of that. Maybe I don't want him to be special like Ahsoka because that says he's got a destiny that I can't control anymore. But, like, finding some way to put these people at loggerheads, at conflict, so that every time you're back on that scene, every time you're back in this rock garden, and we're like, if I just listen, we can find her. It's like, why are your scanners so shitty? A, B, we know you're gonna find her. Ahsoka's got plot armor. The same way, to your point, she goes out with no shields and starts doing lightsaber spaceship battles in 4, because of course she's gonna be fine. You can't kill her because it's the name of the show.
the
Um,
the thing with Anakin and Ahsoka, and I thought they did really well. There's drama there. I felt like there was drama, and I don't mean melodrama. I mean drama, conflict for the first time in this show. And I
mhm,
really, as somebody who's watched all of Clone Wars, as somebody who saw Ahsoka for the first time in theaters in 2008, when Anakin kept calling her Snips, and it was the movie in the movie theater,
mhm.
and followed her whole character arc from being something where I was like, this is the worst character in Star Wars, to, like, this is one of the best characters in Star Wars. Um, I was very, very happy with what I saw in episode 5, and really feel like the show turned a corner. I'm excited to see, for the first time, I'm excited to see what's going to happen in episode 6, episode 7, and episode 8. Um, because I wasn't there for the first part. I also think that there's a world in which you probably could have made this episode 2.
I mean, yeah.
You know, I think you probably could have taken those first 4 episodes, condensed them to 30 minutes, done some stuff with the opening scroll, the red opening scroll there, and been into this, and then spent more time with the Ahsoka that we know and love. You would have gotten Anakin Skywalker up front. Like, it would have energized me as, like, a longtime Star Wars fan much sooner into this, and saved me crapping on the show across 2 podcasts in the last 3 weeks.
Right. Or if you had made text the idea that Ahsoka, and I'm not even saying that this is what her deal is, because again, I remain ignorant of most of Rebels and a good half of Clone Wars. But like, if her biggest fear with taking on an apprentice was that she has been some way colored or tainted by the fact that Anakin was her master, right? If that had been the weight that has been hanging over her this whole time, right? And so all of the Sabine stuff, it's a little like I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should do this because maybe I won't be able to see what's coming. You've got, the force is strong in you, but you're reckless and you're everything that Anakin was, and I am nothing that what Obi-Wan was. And if Obi-Wan was the best of us and he still failed, how can I do that? Right? So that all of those first 3 or 4 episodes are kind of about that. That's why she's so fucking somber, because she's re-engaging with the idea that having an apprentice, being an actual fucking Jedi, is the worst thing that can happen to her. And then this is where you puncture that balloon with revisiting fucking Anakin and getting to talk to him and getting to see and getting to understand that there was nothing she could have done to save him, um, except for him to at some point learn to save himself. And this is the version of Anakin who never learned to save himself. And that's the lesson that she learns, that the fight is always worth fighting or whatever, because the lesson she learns in the world between worlds is fuzzy at best. And I get that that was the point. Like, leave it open to interpretation. Like, you as an audience can come to it and pull from it whatever you like. But that idea that I stood against fucking Darth Vader and I had him and I showed mercy because I believed that there was still something good in him, just like his son did. Like that. Yeah, you've proved that A, you're worth surviving this thing, and B, you've earned the right to have a um, Padawan, because you can understand that people are worth saving and you can see when there's still good in somebody. Like, all of that then would have come to a head in the scene, and then you can push on to fucking space whales. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, sure.
I'll say this, and then lead into that. When I saw Purgles and space whales in the cartoon, and I saw World Between Worlds in the cartoon, the World Between Worlds is put very literally, as if it's a physical place.
Mm.
I hated World Between Worlds when I saw it in Rebels, and I hated the Purgles when I saw them in Rebels. And this episode turned both of those around for me, because this episode made it feel as if this is a not a physical manifestation as much as it is a connection to the force of all things that have been and will be, right? Through the force, things you will see, other places, the future, the past, long friends, friends long gone, right? It goes directly back to Yoda. So on that aspect, I felt like he clarified what World Between Worlds was, and it gelled much stronger with me than it did in the cartoon. And I felt like the Purgles, um, and I think it was just probably the character design. They were very cartoony and colorful in the show, and in this, they felt I bought it, right? Like, if you're gonna buy the space slug in Empire Strikes Back, I feel like you're gonna buy the Purgles. You have to buy the Purgles in this, right? And that worked really well for me. My thing with where I'm hoping they're gonna go with Ahsoka and Sabine is that Ahsoka knows what Sabine's destiny is. And she knows that her ability to use the Force is nada, right? She has a 12 midichlorian count or whatever. She's just never going to do it. And to use another sports analogy, right? There are just some people who cannot be a professional athlete. There is a
Mm.
God-given gift or Force-given gift or midichlorian-given gift that goes along with being a professional athlete. And I think that if Star Wars is showing that anybody can be a Jedi or anybody can use the Force, I think you're doing a disservice. I think the better lesson here is Ahsoka is using Jedi training, I hope, to show Sabine that she is better off being who she is, which is a quick wit Mandalorian, than trying to be a Jedi Knight. And the lesson here is be who you are, not who other people are telling you to be. And I think there's a real good lesson in there that hasn't necessarily been explored in other Star Wars movies that would make me as a fan much happier than like, you gave us the Mandalorian with a lightsaber. Great. It's been in every fan film for the last 30 years. I'm happy we saw it when it counts, but like, make Sabine Wren's turn that she realizes she doesn't need to be a Jedi to be the ruler of Mandalore, if that's what it's going to be when the movie happens in a few years, or whatever her destiny is. It doesn't require her to hold a lightsaber. And I think that's kind of the lesson they were trying to go at the sequels and didn't really get to.
Mhm.
I think they could do it here very powerfully.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for there being less force users in the world. Like it's part of the ongoing issue of like how many Skywalkers are there? Like why is everybody lousy with the force? And I'm using lousy like, 1920 slang, which is like everybody's got it. Um, but I also think, to your point, either she doesn't have the force or she's like, not everybody has the God-given skill to be a professional athlete, but there's always that like one person on the team who's a little too small, who's not quite
Mm-hmm.
fast enough, who's not quite strong enough. It's the Rudy, right? It's the like, here's the person with heart. Here's the person who just works harder than anybody else. Um, Now, whether that person is and could and should be a Jedi, I don't know. But like, there is a place in this world for somebody who's got like a touch of the gift and makes up for everything else with
Mm-hmm.
just like sheer fucking effort and dedication. Um, I don't know what the best version of that is. I feel like they know what it is, maybe they don't. I feel like that's valuable. Um, and listen, I have no stake in fucking space whales. I will say that I'm post Avatar 2 not a fan of people talking to whales who then do things that the plot requires them to do. Um, Especially when you have a scene where Ahsoka is holding the broken husk of that, the magic fucking laser beam key and can pretty much tell you everything that happens until the key opens, right? Like they were there, they were hit, it opened it up, and I think Sabine, she went with him, she gave him the key, he shattered it. Why couldn't you also add, oh yeah, I see where they went? Like, sure. Like, I would not have blanched for a second if she discovers the location of that hyperspace ring and Balin and whatever from using the force the way she's already using the force.
So in the novels that a lot of this is pulling from, you've heard Ahsoka say "heir to the Empire" 14 times already. There is a thing where Luke Skywalker can fly through hyperspace using the Force and doesn't need a computer to plot the course. He can
Mm.
feel his way through it, right? Which is, I think, what they're gonna like. That's kind of how the whales can do it, right? They're kind of like these beings of the Force. So yes, why not? Why not just lean into that? That happens in the book that you keep referencing the title to. Um, I think that, yeah, take it through there. Ultimately, like, it's kind of irrelevant because they're riding in the belly of the whale Jonah into their destiny. But
Right.
I
And again,
I
that's a very convenient way to separate Hera and Ahsoka, because clearly Hera and her kid are not gonna. And like, why are you putting this kid in this much danger? Like, is there no school for this kid to go to? I have questions about
also,
General
why?
Syndu's
Yeah.
parenting.
Now this is 5 years after Return of the Jedi. I'm curious why none of them are training at Luke's Jedi Academy either, right? Because that's when this is happening. Um, the the my hope. Do you want to hear my prediction? You always take a show halfway through and you say, this is what I want to see going forward.
Mhm.
And then it's never that good. And then we're always upset, and Kevin yells. Here is my hope for Ahsoka.
Give it to me.
As somebody who has read, again, all the Grand Admiral Thrawn stuff from way back in the day, I do not feel like the way that they portrayed Grand Admiral Thrawn in Rebels is very strong. In that, in the books, Thrawn is almost like a combination of like he's like Sherlock Holmes almost as the bad guy, right? He's Moriarty. He can see things about you that you don't know about yourself, and that leads him to he's the smartest guy in the room, and he can predict your behavior based on your artwork and your tendencies and the thing and the nuance that you do that he doesn't that you don't even see yourself, right? And I don't in Rebels I felt like Thrawn was portrayed very much like expositionally. Well, I know what people are going to do through their artwork. And then he became a generic bad guy. My hope in this show is that we ride the whales out to this other galaxy and they find a threat that is so terrible that it's worse than Thanos, right? For people who've read the books, something like the Yuuzhan Vong are out there, and Thrawn has discovered that they are coming to our galaxy, and he has been waging a war out there, a tactical war where he's gaining information. And he is now going to come back to our galaxy, and he looks at the New Republic and says, this bureaucracy and squabbling will never survive against what's coming to destroy us and enslave us. And I have 3 years to take over our galaxy in order to protect it from what I know is coming. And in that way, you make Grand Admiral Thrawn brilliant. You make him the tactician he should be. And you give him a little bit of that Thanos is right. In that, his goal is correct. But he's incorrect in enslaving a full people in order to avoid being enslaved by something else. And I think you can make him very interesting and sympathetic, but still a bad guy if you build it out that way.
I buy it.
That's my hope.
I'd
That's
watch
my
that
hope
shit.
what happens.
And I also, again, I have zero context or information about Thrawn. Is Thrawn a Force user or no?
He is not. So Grand Admiral Thrawn, like I said, he is like the Sherlock Holmes of Imperial admirals.
Mhm.
He leads first with an incredible logic. So
Okay.
he's superhuman in that his brain is just that much better than everybody else's.
I mean, then I think that then what is kind of great is if Thrawn discovers, like, listen, I know what's coming. I know how to beat them. I have everything that I need. If I can take over the New Republic and turn it into, wartime footing, and we can increase product, like all of the like behind the scenes shit. Like I'm a super manager and I know how to meet this goal. What I do not have and have no access to is a Force user. Like I actually need a fucking Jedi. I need to find somebody who can stand next to me and be that person. I need the sharp end of the fucking stick. Um, and Balin is not going to be that person for me because he's compromised in this way. His Padawan is not going to be that person for me because she's not strong enough. Like you're the one. Like you're the one who's been like kissed by the flame of the dark side and understands what it means, but have chosen the light side and you're willing to do what's required. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen unless you stand by my side and help me. And then Ahsoka's got to choose between doing the right thing with the wrong guy and then doing the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I'd
You
fucking watch that.
you came very close to at least the first part of that. Is in the books, Grand Admiral Thrawn has pulled DNA or something from an old school Old Republic Jedi and has cloned him, and that is
Ooh.
his Force user that sits alongside him, who ultimately goes insane, and it doesn't quite work out the same way. But yes, in this case, if you have this existential uh, other galaxy threat that we are unprepared for, and it's like the only way we can get through this is with my mind and your special abilities, that's super interesting, right? Because you're also then in the cartoon at the end of Clone Wars, Ahsoka walks away from the Jedi Order
Mhm.
because they are pressuring her into being something that she doesn't believe in. And now 30 years later, 25 years later, you are presenting that same choice to her, but now she's on the opposite, almost on the opposite side of it. And it could be a huge, very awesome character moment of like, what do? You walked away from this before, now you have to, and you've been flirting with coming back, but are you going to come back and join up with that guy to save life, right? Like that's what
Mhm.
a Jedi's true purpose is to protect life. It's not to be a warrior, as we just saw her fight Anakin on. And to have that come full circle, it could be
Yeah.
amazing.
And then to have her have to return to this galaxy and return to the New Republic and return to Hera and Sabine and whatever as, the sort of right hand, the major domo of fucking Thrawn. Like what does that do to her? What does that do to her friends? Like, does that just break everybody's spirit to see that, well, fucking one of the last of us? What does that do to Luke? Because of course Luke is going to come back into this because he's still alive, and why wouldn't he? Like, and if you can find a way to pit fucking Luke Skywalker against Ahsoka Tano, like who doesn't want that as a fucking season finale? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do. Give me that, please.
Yeah, it could be incredible, and I know all of this is building up to the event movie, right? So we're not
Mhm.
going to get that resolution in Ahsoka, but hopefully we get that setup. And then in Mandalorian season 4, we get a little piece of this, and then whatever else they're going to drop between now and whenever that Dave Filoni movie comes out in 3 or 4 years, if the strike ever ends, um, then I think that there's some really cool potential between where they took Bo Katan in Mandalorian season 3, where they could take Ahsoka, and if you can get one more, and then maybe like Skeleton Crew, right? Like
Mhm.
Ahsoka is your Luke Skywalker, Bo Katan is your Han Solo, and Skeleton Crew is your Lando and your Chewbacca and your other characters. And if you build all of these shows, and Grand Admiral Thrawn and this other threat is the thing, is Thrawn your Loki, essentially, right? And you
Right.
need to team up with Loki to beat Thanos. Um, that could be amazing. That would be a thing that like got Star Wars humming back in the movie theater, I think.
I mean, I 100% agree with you. I I will say that I'm not entirely sure that Dave Filoni's the guy to do that, only because, again, I mean, we talked about it when Ahsoka started. You want to be able to welcome people back to Star Wars again. And if you're building, and I remember there was some dude in the comments of my Instagram post when I was announcing that we were going to do this Black Man, who was like, "You say that your problem with Ahsoka is that you didn't do the reading. Um, you didn't watch Force, you didn't watch the Clone Wars, you didn't watch Rebels. That's how a lot of us felt with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that we didn't read 30 years worth of comic books." And I'll say, you didn't have to. Like, they built that universe very specifically that you didn't need to know anything before you watched Iron Man, before you watched Thor. Now granted, you had to keep watching those movies. Like, once there was the onboarding, like once you get past the first Avengers, like you kind of have to be in the zone to understand what it is.
You could watch Avengers, I think, without having seen the other movies, and you kind of understand where you're at.
Right. Like it got to like, and there were certain movies you could watch without any context. You could watch Ant-Man without context. You can watch Guardians without context. You could watch Black Panther without context. But I mean, you could fucking watch Winter Soldier without real context. But like, you couldn't watch Avengers Infinity War and then Avengers Endgame and know what was happening. Like, you couldn't watch Black Panther 1 and then Black Panther 2 expecting them to be sequels. Like, it did get a little bit incestuous that way. But like, if you're starting a thing, if you're trying to bring people to a new program, then just a little bit of like, let's tell you who everybody is. Let's open these doors a little bit more. Let's just add some context. If you're already in the world, you know it, and you can do it in a way that doesn't make it like a retread, but like help a new person out. Just
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't require a lot. And so like if that's your giant gambit, if that's the big work of this version of Star Wars in the hands of Filoni and Jon Favreau, okay, sure. But like, and we're building to a movie that you're going to hope lots of people go to, not just the people who watch the show. You have to give us a little bit more handlebars that we can steer our way through this universe. Um,
Although
and it doesn't.
the only part that show that has been like that so far has been Ahsoka. Meaning, you could watch Mando season one as an entry point, and
Absolutely.
none of it, and they do introduce Ahsoka in Mando and Book of Boba Fett. So it's the outside, meaning like if Hera doesn't do anything else for the rest of the show and that, you'll be caught up by that movie. The world will be caught up by that end game, right? That
Mhm.
end game movie. So it's only Ahsoka really that people are struggling with. And they did do an okay job in Mandalorian season 2 of introducing who Bo-Katan is and building that up, right? Like that wasn't people weren't really lost in that space, even though
Yeah,
she had been a huge part of a couple of seasons of Clone Wars.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't isolating in the way that
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka is. I mean, the Mandalorian issue became who's this show about? Like we showed up for Din Djarin, we showed up for Mando, and we showed up for this baby Yoda. And then suddenly we're now like in season two, season three. He could not be in these episodes and it wouldn't make a difference. Um, that's
Three
its own separate issue.
three felt like the Bo-Katan. If the Mandalorian is actually not Din Djarin, if it's actually a set of tales about Mandalorians and he's handing off to Bo-Katan, that's what season 3 felt like to me. And even the
Yeah.
ending where you circle wipe into him on a rocking chair in retirement felt very much like the Mandalorian is now her.
Right. Which, hey, it's all a choice, and I'm not going to say that it happens to every long running show that it's someone you've got to hand off to the next generation. Um, it happens, but not all the time. It's just a really odd choice here. But I do think that when Marvel worked, it was because they were telling that story from Iron Man to Endgame on the movie screen. There were no TV shows at that point that were required viewing. And so the audience scale was the same, right? Like we're all going to these things. We're all going to the ones that matter. So by the time you get to the climax, we're all here. Whereas if I've got to watch like five different TV shows before you then launch a movie, is that audience big enough to all go to that movie and make it a hit? Or do you then have to try and somehow widen that audience for the feature in a way that like, what is happening here? Like, what's
True.
going on?
Or do they not care and they're like, hey, Serenity and Firefly?
Right. Except Serenity was not a hit. Firefly was not a hit. Um,
um, I'll push back. I think having watched the episodes of Ahsoka that Dave Filoni directed and the episodes of Mandalorian that Dave Filoni directed, I think that uh, I'm not going to rave about the way he works with the actors, but nobody raves about the way George works with the actors. But I will say his staging and blocking and camera direction is the best I have probably seen in Star Wars. The way that the camera moves in the episodes he is directing, I think is uh, revealing in a way that we have not seen before in Star Wars.
I will. I mean, not that we need to like split hairs about this stuff because it ultimately doesn't matter. I will say there were sequences and shots in episode 5 that like I was slack-jawed at, like, holy shit, that's gorgeous. And then there's the stuff in episode 1 where we're gonna spend literally 6 minutes having Ahsoka put shit on top of pillars and twist things. Like we're in a map room sequence that kind of goes nowhere and kind of does nothing. Um, I just feel, and again, that was a pace issue. That was like you could have cut half of this out and we would have gotten it. Like all of these scenes feel like they could have been edited better. All of these scenes feel like they had too much air in it. Like we're padding it to get to 42 minutes when it could have been 30 and told us the same amount of
I,
story.
I'm gonna people always yell at you about Picard. I'm gonna
Mm.
throw myself in that fire. I had an interview scheduled to be an assistant editor on Ahsoka,
Oh,
and I turned it down.
really?
It was during the pandemic. I was very busy with Hollywood Reporter, and I had a new kid, and she was maybe a year old at the time, uh, not even, and I didn't want to commute to Manhattan Beach for a massive pay cut, and in working 50 hours a week plus a 2-hour commute both ways each day, and I said
Mm.
no. I said that to somebody. They're like, "You would have been better had you been there." So I
You
don't
know,
think assistant editors have that power.
right. But like that, it's it's one of those like you cannot take back a choice you already made, like, and doing so is folly. Like we make the choices we make, we have to live with them. And you made the choices that you made for incredibly good reasons. Namely, I got this kid that I gotta feed, and I gotta start building a college fund, and I can't take the pay cut to go do this thing. Like that is eminently defendable if anybody ever decides they want to give you shit for it. And I have no idea how much pull an assistant editor has in that, but probably not enough to be like, hey, let's take some of the fat out of this. Let's
I,
pull
I'll
some of the air out of
I'll
these
tell you
scenes.
what. I have been the assistant editor on every Kevin Smith movie since after Red State, and I have zero pull when it comes to taking stuff out of Kevin Smith movies. Zero. And I promise you, Kevin listens to my opinion a lot more than anybody at Lucasfilm would listen to my opinion. So,
Yeah. Um, but listen, all of this is to say, um, I enjoyed episode 5 of Ahsoka more than I've enjoyed any other episode of this show. Um, I still think that it has kind of big endemic problems. Some of it is maybe it's an overwhelming reverence for these characters. Maybe it's a a unwillingness to shed some plot armor from people. Maybe it's the like I know where it's going. I'm unwilling to deviate, and these episodes need to be 42 minutes or not. I don't know what those issues are, but like every now and again, it engages in a way that does sort of remind me why I like Star Wars. But all too often, it is sitting right next to a scene where I'm like, what are we doing here? Why is this happening? Like, um,
it, can
it's enough to
anybody
get me to keep watching.
can anybody in the chat confirm? I saw a meme that the young lady who played Ahsoka was the same as the young lady who played Gamora. Is that true? Is that actually
Oh,
happened
and the flashbacks to
in
when like
yeah? Because she was awesome also.
yeah, no, she's very good. She's very good. And like, fucking props for Hayden for like, I don't know how old he is. My guess is he's in his mid 40s.
He's, I think, a little bit older than me, 44.
Yeah. Like he can still fucking do it, man. Like some of that choreography, some of that, like all that action stuff and the leaping and the jumping and the twirling and all that stuff. Like, I mean, I can't do that stuff anymore. Granted, I almost never could, and nobody's paying me to get into that shape, but still.
I just love that, you know, there's something about a comeback story, right? And I just love that he has the opportunity now to do the thing that we all kind of wanted him to do before. And I'm not a prequel hater at all, so I don't say that like shitting on the prequels. Um, but there's some stuff in Clone Wars where you got to see Matt Lanter be the Anakin that you always wanted, especially towards
Hmm.
the end, and getting to see Hayden do some of that stuff and be that guy. And the lightsaber fight was fine, but like the more interesting stuff to me was when he was poking at Ahsoka, during those flashback scenes, or the Force vision scenes or whatever they were. Um, it was nice to see him get to do the thing, and it was nice to see, as a human being, it was nice to see, and as a fan, it was nice to see Anakin's face, live action face, even if it was strangely de-aged and had a weird wig on, um, do that thing as well.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast or not, but, and again, because I do not come to the world between worlds knowing what it is. Like, I I came to it as a person who is somewhat familiar with this version of the trope of storytelling of the person on the brink of life and death who is, you know, this is limbo, right? This is the I have not
Mm-hmm.
moved on, I have not moved back, so I'm in this particularly mentally somewhat weird world. We've seen it 1,000 times in movies, right? Like the final threshold battle of am I going to fight my way back to the world, or am I going to succumb to this whatever. So I didn't know that it's like a force place where then if you're so deep in the force that you can see the past and the future and it's all one and the same. But the idea of like Star Wars what if, right? Like, what if he won that fight with in Mustafar? What if Darth Vader was not an asthmatic amputee? What if he had everything? What if he finished his training? Because I always thought that that was a nice mirror between Vader and Luke, was that they both had like abbreviated training.
Mm-hmm.
That they both were, at the very least, that and I encountered this a bit in writing the Darth Vader story that I wrote for Marvel, and getting feedback from Lucasfilm licensing saying things like Vader Vader has power but not control. Vader can
Mm.
do big things but not small things. Because I had the scene where I want him to catch a laser blast in midair, a bit like Kylo Ren, but then like twist it and then just send it flying back to where it came from. Like Vader can't do that. Like Vader can block it, he can ricochet it like we see in Empire, but he can't snatch it from midair, and like he just doesn't have precision. He can pull a fucking starship out of the sky, but he can't do small things. Um, because his training, like nobody taught him that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But to see a Darth Vader who got to finish that cycle, to see a Darth Vader who, maybe was able to find a Sith Lord to finish that training, maybe fucking Palpatine before getting all weird and crispy electro fried was able to do some of that stuff for him. But even just a guy who had full control of his body again, like what does that look like? What does that feel like? How much harder is it to defeat the Empire with a Vader who can breathe?
Mm-hmm.
Like show me that story. I remember feeling that way at the end of the Obi-Wan show, where it's like this entire finale is based upon us giving a shit about Luke Skywalker when we know he's not going to die because canon demands that he lives. So having an inquisitor show up on the planet, chasing him through this valley, it's like
That was
it's fine.
silly. End it,
It's
end it,
silly.
end it before.
Yeah, just we don't need
End it
it
with that
because
fight.
there's no jeopardy. There's nothing like everybody on this screen is going to live except for this Inquisitor. Like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru survive it, Luke survives it, so why are we here? But there is a version of that sequence where like Luke doesn't survive, where like they fucking kill Luke Skywalker. And so now the galaxy's final hope is Leia. That then Obi-Wan trains himself. It's Obi-Wan and Leia, and not Obi-Wan and Luke. And so what happens when she's the one who like is no longer a senator's daughter, but is a fucking like street rat living,
Mm-hmm.
if not on Tatooine, but anywhere else. Um, and then it's like, oh shit, I've never seen this before. Give me some Star Wars where I don't know what's going to happen
Yeah.
because I almost always know what's going to happen. Um, and so like I just got this itch for like what if Star Wars, um, which we'll never get, but
Did you watch
even still.
Visions?
I did,
It's
which
a
I
little like that. It's just not main. It's not the characters you know, right? But you did get there's some kind of cool what if stuff in there.
yeah, like it's mostly on the periphery, but it's still like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this is neat. I never thought they'd do this with Star Wars. I dig
Mm-hmm.
this. Um, but but yeah, and so any way, especially in Ahsoka, that they can find ways to fucking play with our perception of what's going to happen that bounce against what we know to be canon, um, that disabuses people of their plot armor and makes us really have some jeopardy and some fear and like, oh shit, did they just kill Hera? Oh, I thought this was gonna be a whole thing, but no. Huh. Okay. Interesting. I want more interesting. I want more like, oh,
Yeah.
but I think episode 5 bought me watching the rest of this season, which was hanging in the balance at the end of
Mm-hmm.
episode 4.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I of course, I'm like bound by the rules of me that I have to watch it, but um, I am walking down the rest of this path with in eagerness, whereas I went into episode 5 with a lot of okay, how long is this episode gonna be? You know,
Right.
or like a do I want to watch this at 1:30 in the morning after a long day of work because I don't care, or am I going to save it until the morning because I really want to pay attention? And now I'm going to save it to the morning, whereas before I was like, I don't care.
Right. Yeah. No, I believe it. So that's our Ahsoka Tano talk, everybody. I hope
That's pretty good. We
we
went
didn't.
long on Ahsoka. We did like an
We
hour
did.
of Ahsoka.
I mean, it helps when we both saw it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope we didn't step on too many toes. I hope we didn't crush too many feelings. Um, I am still cautiously optimistic, but still, they still gotta. There's a way to there's a way to save this particular ship, um, from being what it was and turning into to what, especially JC believes that it can be. Um, so hey, fingers crossed. Maybe
We
they'll listen to
wanted
this podcast.
I think that's the thing is like I want everything to be awesome. I want it to be great. Um, and let me pose this to you because I get asked this a lot, especially in today's kind of culture with any fandom, Marvel or whatever. And there's a lot of people who are just like, I came from a time when there wasn't very much Star Wars, and now that there is so much Star Wars, um, none of it's bad, right? And if you think it's bad, well, you should have lived through what I lived through. It's like, well, I did. I got into Star Wars when there was no Star Wars. Um, and I always likened it to like gummy bears, where like, you know, this package of gummy bears you get below the cash register at CVS is wonderful and it's the greatest tasting thing you've ever had. But the 3-pound bag of gummy bears, if you eat them all, you're going to be sick for 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of distilled it down to, and this isn't just for Star Wars. This is all fandoms, Marvel, everything. Is I feel like there's two types of people now. I feel like there are, and I'm apologize to our audience, but I'm going to use another sports analogy, which is there are fans and there are cheerleaders. And a fan is not going to be okay with the New York Yankees tanking a season because George Steinbrenner isn't going to put the best players on the field. I know George Steinbrenner's dead, but he was a character in Seinfeld, so whatever. Like, I am not okay as a fan, and most sports fans are not okay with being with a knowing that the people in charge of the thing they're rooting for are half-assing it, right?
Mhm.
Put the best product on the field that you can. But there's a weird thing in pop culture fandom now where fans are criticized for not liking a thing that they want to love by cheerleaders of that thing who are like the only thing it needs is that logo on it, right? Like if it if it has that logo on it, that's all it needs for me, right? And that's like a cheerleader, right? If you're a cheerleader for the Dallas Cowboys and the Cowboys go 0-16, you cheer the same way for that team that you do if they're 16-0 and win the Super Bowl. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, this thing that's happened in fandom is like you want the thing so bad you've become a cheerleader for whatever it is, and you don't, you're like a fan is allowed to expect the best and is allowed to criticize the thing when it's not as good as they hoped.
Yeah. There's this is also going to come from a reference slightly to the left of all of this, but it's not sports. There is a fantastic James Baldwin quote, which is, I love America more than any other country on the face of the planet. And because I do, I reserve the right to criticize her unrelentingly.
Mm-hmm.
It is that love of being a fan that that earns you the right of criticism. It's like, yeah, hey, I was here from the beginning. I came to whatever it is. I'm a fan of this thing. Be better,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I reserve the right to be critical of it when it's not. Um, I think that Star Wars specifically, but sort of pop culture generally, is a nostalgia based enterprise, and it does require a certain amount of absence to make the heart grow fonder, and it's very hard to be nostalgic for a thing you get all the time. So, like, pumping the brakes is not a bad idea. I think that Marvel has learned that, given the glut of Marvel content we had, that all of which was fine, but none of which was great. I think Star Wars has hit that, where they were like, we're not doing any more movies till we figure it out. Even if the movies could have been good, bad, or indifferent, we're pumping the brakes. We got to slow down these shows. We gotta regather. We gotta reconnoiter and figure out ways, for us to maximize the footprint. Um, and so all I want is for it to be good. But I will shout from the rooftops when it's like, oh, that wasn't. We could have. That should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this not better?
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not like we're rooting for things to fail. And now I guess here's the other thing. There is enough Star Wars out there that there's no reason that Star Wars needs to be identity politics, right? Meaning like if you love Ahsoka and I think it's mid, or you love Last Jedi and I don't talk about it anymore because of the internet, um, I think that there's enough out there that it's okay. It's not just 6 hours of Star Wars anymore or 6 hours of Marvel comics where like you have to tie your identity to all of it. Like you and I both raved about Andor. I think that would win every Emmy award if it didn't have a Star Wars logo on it because I think it's the best sci-fi that we've seen in ages,
mhm.
And so I root for all of it. I root so hard for all of it to be great, episode by episode.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's not.
and it all can't be, and that's also fine. but it all should want to be. It all should try to be, and it's when it isn't and when it doesn't that I start to get, I'm not even gonna say offended or upset. I just get a little sad. Just like, huh, that could have been great. It all
Yeah,
could have been great.
yeah.
Um, well, we're gonna segue to some news, but we're gonna leave with some Star Wars news. So don't go anywhere just yet, JC. Um, it seems as if we were all very excited that the Lando TV show had not um, vanished, was not atomized, it was not disintegrated. Um, that Donald Glover and his brother Steven were going to take over the writing and the shooting and the directing. Probably it was going to be like Atlanta 2.0, but for Star Wars with a Lando show. But now apparently it's not going to be a show. Now apparently it's going to be a movie,
Ooh.
according to Stephen Glover, who was interviewed on a podcast. He said it's not even a show. The idea right now is to do a movie. Right now, because of the strike, it's like a game of telephone, but that seems to be their plan. And maybe this is part of the let's not put things on Disney Plus that we cannot charge more money for, and let's go make a movie that people have to pay to see.
Do you think there is a little bit of Black Panther cultural significance to that? Like the one black dude in the Holy Trilogy is getting his event versus dropping it on Disney Plus at a half hour each week. Like they're going to try to capture a little of that Black Panther magic.
I mean, they very well could, like it absolutely doesn't it doesn't seem like an odd choice to me, you know, in that for all of those reasons, right? Like it's Donald Glover, who is beloved by a world at large. And I remember somebody telling me, I remember I was having this conversation, might have been in a con somewhere, and this person was like, I'm pretty sure that Donald Glover is maybe the single most talented person of our generation. Like, because there's nothing that he can't do, right? Like, he's an actor, he's a director, he's a writer, he's a musician, he can rap, he can sing. Like, he might be able to paint for all we know, but like, there hasn't been a single threat person like that in a very long time. Um, and so I would not put it behind Disney and Lucasfilm to just get behind that dude and be like, let's do the best version of this we possibly can, and let's try to make it a cultural event. Let's try to make it a pop cultural moment. Um, which hell, fuck it, yeah, I'm all for.
Do you know
Um,
what's so I just did some quick math. Do you know what the difference in age between Billy D when he shot Empire Strikes Back and Donald Glover is right now?
what?
Because we're doing a young Lando series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Billy D, when he shot in 1980, he was 43 years old. So he would have shot the Lando parts when he was 41, 42, right? Probably 41 ish. Donald Glover is 39 years old today. So by the time that show starts shooting, he will be around, or that movie, the same age as old Lando was on Cloud City.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's fucking awesome.
So there we
Yeah,
go.
no, I mean I'm here for a Lando movie just as I was here for a Lando TV show. I'm very much here for the Donald Glover version of it all.
Which would you
Uh,
prefer?
um, I tend to prefer TV versus movies only because you get more story. You get more chances to kind of twist and turn and subvert expectations with a show. But like also 6 hours of Lando might be too much Lando, right? Like it could also just be Ocean's 11, and that might be everything you need from a Lando
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. I will
You
say,
know,
I think I tend to like movies because I think there's magic in a story and a ride that has a beginning, middle, and end contained within 100 to 125 minutes. There's a magic in the temporal way that all has to work. Like you can't like for a movie to be great, there's less opportunity to fix it than a TV show.
Right.
And I think that's cool. However, I would love to see an episodic. Let me tell you about the time Lando show. And it's just every episode starts with, let me tell you about the time. I think that would be incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I just after having finished Atlanta not too long ago, I came to it very late. Um, they may or may not have tried to take my blurred card for not watching Atlanta when the rest of the world was. But that's fine. We do things in our own good time. But like I'm of the belief that I'm not gonna say he can do no wrong because there's episodes of that show I didn't love, but in general, like yeah, no, like wicked talented that dude is. So like whatever version he thinks is best, I will take. But Lando is
He,
not a character I need more character of.
mm-hmm.
I just need to have a good time with Lando. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's either the like we're doing 6 episodes and 6 adventures about the time Lando did this cool shit, or the here's how I stole Cloud City. And this is just the 2 hour version of my
Mm-hmm.
spectacular heist from which I stole Cloud City under from out from under the dude who had it before I did.
Yeah, Ben Bamboo says I wanted a Billy D. Williams narrated flashback show for Lando.
Yeah.
That is my alt. Like Billy D's 86. Get him. Just get him.
Yeah. And also let us never forget that Billy D. Williams' given name is William December Williams, you guys. Maybe the best name ever given in the comics. William Williams. Yes, sir. I'm right here. A
Amazing.
couple of the quick news hits. Have you been watching One Piece?
I
Are
haven't.
you interested at all?
I have heard amazing things about it though.
I never watched a stitch of the anime, of which there are apparently about 1,000 episodes of. Um, so I much like Clone Wars and Rebels, I came to it somewhat cold. Um, but I'm kind of in love with it, like the live action version of it. Like it is incredibly good natured. It's got a ton of humor and empathy. It's got a main character who, like, his superpower is not just that he's kind of made of rubber, is that he believes in himself to an almost sickly degree, which is also somewhat magnetic. And so it's just fun. Like it's kind of daffy and silly. Um, they did spare no expense with making it, but because looking at that show, it's like what? And apparently they shot it in South Africa and used a bunch of the pirate ships that were left over from Black Sails that were still fucking there,
Wow.
and just like repurposed them and refashioned them into these kind of fantastic things. But like, and it's an interesting test case, using that, watching that, and then watching the soak at the same time. Both pieces of media, both TV shows, based on something with hundreds, if not thousands, of episodes of story behind it already. But the on ramp to One Piece is much simpler and much more effective and emotional and clear than the on ramp to Ahsoka was. But also looking at it in terms of like live action adaptations of anime and why this seems to be succeeding where Cowboy Bebop seems to have failed. Um, in that it given it had so much to adapt from, it just takes what it wants, refashions what it needs to, remembers why you're showing up, and is not out to make sort of frame by frame replications of the source material, but it's just kind of getting the spirit of why you loved it. And then not to say making a new thing, but just adapting it. Where I always feel as if when you don't do that, you do somewhat at your own peril. Like, Cowboy Bebop felt a little inert because it always felt like it was just we're doing the thing that you saw in the cartoon and you'll love it because it was in the
Mm-hmm.
cartoon, as opposed to we're making a new thing inspired by the cartoon, and we'll take what we want and we'll leave the rest. Um, and there's just an energy to it that is not that didn't make its way into Cowboy Bebop.
The big hole in my nerd fandom is anime. That's my like exhaust port on my nerd Death Stars. I just have zero basis on any of it. So maybe I'll jump in with this.
Yeah. I mean, it goes down real easy. The cast is so fucking just engaging. Sorry, yeah, they're not cartoons, Mark. It says cat food. No, you're right. It's anime. I similarly have a kind of a giant blind spot for most modern anime. Like I was a bit of an anime movie kid because like, when I came of age was that first like 80s wave of imports of like Fist of the North Star and Akira and Ghost in the Shell and that sort of stuff, like Ninja Scroll. Like I kind of inhaled because there was so little of it, but I am not up to date at all. Like with the flood tide of anime
Mm,
that seems to come via Netflix or Hulu or Crunchyroll or whatever. Like there's so much of it. There's too much of it, and I just can't get down with it. Um, but this is cool, and it got picked up for a second season because apparently it seems to be doing so well on Netflix that they were like sort of 2 weeks out, like we're gonna do more of this, and we are not in any way hungry for source material. So so yeah, if you love the adventures of the Straw Hat Pirates, then
mm,
you're going to get another season of them. There is no set date on when because clearly there's no writing and a second season until we're done with the strike. But Netflix seems to be intent on doing another season. So huzzah, everybody wins. Um, and finally, I guess it's a weird bit of comic book news that came across the transom the other day, and I'm not entirely sure how to parse it because I am no expert in sort of copyright trademark law. But Bill Willingham, the writer creator of Fables for DC Comics and Vertigo, has declared that it is now public domain, and that because of a sort of long-standing feud between him and DC Comics over a sequel and a whatever, and so he had gotten so frustrated and tried to sue to get the rights back, and that was never going to happen. And so he just said, you know what, it belongs to everybody now. I don't think it does. I mean, I think that DC has the trademark on some of that stuff, which actually supersedes copyright, and so you cannot use those fixed forms of those characters. You cannot use the title Fables. You cannot use most of the things that makes that comic book series unique. But Fables was based on, you know, Snow White and the Big Bad Wolf and Pinocchio and all of these characters taken from sort of Grimm's fairy tales and popular culture, all of which are already in the public domain. So, like Once Upon a Time on ABC was basically Fables, but because all of those characters belong to the world, they could do that without an issue. So, like, if you wanted to make a story about the big bad wolf, you could do that. Even if you wanted to put them in modern times, you could do that. You just couldn't do any of the stuff that was in Fables and call it Fables. Um, so yeah, it's a weird sort of thing, which seems to be born of some animus between a creator and DC Comics, which, if you know the saga of Alan Moore, is
mm.
not a new thing. Alan Moore, who also most recently decided that all of the residuals and proceeds that he would get from the sale of V for Vendetta and Watchmen and and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, everything that he did for DC Comics, all of that money is to go directly to Black Lives Matter, um, because he's like,
Wow.
I don't want your money, I don't give a fuck. I've hated everything done from it.
Eh,
I'm sort of washing my hands from it, but making sure that the proceeds of it go to a place that he feels can do some good. And I wholeheartedly agree with both that decision and his choice of where it goes. But DC and comic creator relations does not seem to be in the best place.
What's interesting is the film music version of Fables is Michael Bay. Have you ever heard this? The Michael Bay trick?
No. Hmm.
So when Michael Bay, uh, not always, but a lot of times when Michael Bay will want to put a song in his movie and it's too expensive. So he will hire a he will pick a song from, so like Kiss, right? Kiss has a ton of huge hits that they didn't write. Like God Gave Rock and Roll to You, right? Is
Hmm.
not a Kiss song. But if Michael Bay wanted to use that song in a movie, he would hire a Kiss cover band and pick a Kiss song that Kiss didn't write. So that he is paying royalties on the original band and not the he doesn't have to pay Gene Simmons anything. So that's the
Wow.
trick in movies when you hear a song like in the one that I always think about because I know the guy who sang it is in the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg and Jennifer Aniston, which is essentially the Judas Priest story. They use the song California Girls by Van Halen, except they pay the music rights for the Beach Boys, which is much cheaper than Van Halen, and then got a Van Halen, the best Van Halen cover band, which was called Atomic Punks, to re-record the song as Van Halen. And so he's paying pennies on the dollar for the music he's using in those
Wow.
situations. So it's kind of like this guy being like, hey, if you want to tell a story with the big bad wolf and Pinocchio, go for it. It's like, I guess I
Yeah.
could have done that before I got your permission.
There's also a great trick that Edgar Wright did in Baby Driver, which is there are rather than like rather than use like the Dr. Dre song like the next episode or whatever, um in his movie, he would then use the song that sampled and then use the
Oh.
original. Like he uses the Dave McCallum The Edge, which has like that same bloom, 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 bloom,
Mm-hmm.
bloom. Like that part of it was pulled from this original song. He just uses the original song. So it both gets you immediately in the headspace of the more famous version of it for like a
Mm-hmm.
fraction of the money.
Oh, that's
But
so
like
smart.
it, yeah, like it just conjures that song. He does that like 3 or 4 different times of like, here's the thing that you think it is, but it isn't that. But I got you there for far less money, which I thought was just brilliant. Like, all I need to do is get you in the headspace, and you're here. But yes, that's all of which is not quite as insidious as the Gene Roddenberry "I'm writing lyrics to the Star Trek theme song," so that I now get half of the publishing from Alexander Courage, um,
Uh,
which is like of dick moves. That is a Hall of Fame like silver medal dick move. Like, how much do you think kept on going into Gene's pocket because he wrote lyrics to a song that you've never heard the lyrics to, but always got paid for every time it appeared on the air? Yeah, yeah. Whew. Um, but yeah, like it remains a slow news week slash slow news month slash slow news season. Um, and so until the strikes are over, and like every week there is a reason to have some hope. Like it seems as if the WGA and the studios are going to sit down sometime in the near future and have another series of conversations. Hopefully, they will lead somewhere. Um, because the strike will end. It has to end. Um, they all of these billion-dollar companies, the only thing that they sell are television shows and movies. And so that is the only product that they make. So they will have to make that product. And so otherwise, Universal goes out of business and Disney goes out of business and Warner Brothers goes out of business and Paramount goes out of business because all that they have is either the library, which they cannot, make as much money on as new stuff. Um, so they need the new stuff. So it'll be resolved sooner rather than later is my hope, but it will definitely happen. Um, but until then, we are somewhat trapped in a somewhat news drought. But hey, we'll muddle through as we always do. Um, but I guess that's it for news, man.
yeah.
Do we feel like we should go to do some Q&A? Does anybody
We
have some questions in the in
we
the in
we
the
can do some
crowd?
quick QA. I've got three
Mm-hmm.
from the stream. AI Pacino wanted to know if you had to open a bar based on a movie or piece of pop culture, what would it be based on? I have my answer.
fancy that. Um, I always thought that, like, let's say I had a couple $1 billion lying around, and I'm very surprised that this never happened. But like, and maybe Atlantic City was a place for it, maybe Vegas, there's still room for it. But why there was never a James Bond licensed casino? Like, why
Oh,
there was just literally never a casino royale, right? That like, and not that you'd want it to be quite as immersive as like the Star Wars hotel, which you are finally going to,
I
right?
am. I leave a week from tomorrow.
Oh, I cannot wait. That is a reason to come back and do a podcast, is
So
to
yeah,
get the
we
full
we could
report.
do one. We could do one. I get back on the 29th. We could do one the last day of the month.
Excellent. That'd be amazing. But like, and so not that you'd want your James Bond casino to be quite that immersive, but like in the way that Playboy had casinos and stuff, like just the vibe and the feel and the ethos of like
Mm-hmm.
high luxury and good taste and excellent food and expertly made drinks and like gambling and entertainment, like all that felt very James Bondy. And so the fact that there never was one is somewhat odd to me. Um, Not that I liked this movie very much, but there's probably definitely a Dick Tracy bar to be made. Um, like very colorful, very sort of mobster, very like, jazz age Turner, like the roaring 20s, but also with fucking primary colors and all of that shit.
I,
Um,
I have two.
you have two.
I have
Okay.
two other bars that I will never do. I have ones that I want to do that I'm not going to say out loud, but I have two that I think would be amazing. On your Dick Tracy James Bond,
Mhm.
the no-brainer is the Ink and Paint Club from Roger Rabbit,
Mm,
where you
absolutely.
get it's just like real old school, and you have some holograms playing pianos of like Donald and Daffy Duck, and you do that. No brainer, coolest place to hang out. Ice cubes that are dyed black so they look like actual rocks, like whole thing. Somebody take that and run with it. Somebody who's going to message me about how to open a Scum and Villainy, do that instead. It doesn't exist. Um, the other one that I think would be amazing is with how accessible projection and like LCD screens are now. A holodeck bar, straight
Mm.
up holodeck bar. And what we did at Scum and Villainy is we redid our front room as a very uh, 24th century inspired spaceship. And we haven't put it up yet, but we're gonna put a sign over the front door to when you walk into like this part of the bar that just
Mm.
says holodeck 3 active.
Nice.
So for
That's
everybody who comes in claiming to tell me what my bar is or is not is actually just a holodeck simulation. It's like
that's
my
kind of
little troll. But I think you could do the floor, the walls, and the ceiling, and even the bar top and front as screens, and so it could change every. You could be in a forest, and then you could be in a spaceship, then you could be in a on a desert planet, and you could do all sorts of really cool stuff with that.
that's kind of awesome. Yeah, I remember being in New York. I guess this would have been like the mid to late 90s, which seems to have been the heyday for like vaguely pop culture inspired bars. So I remember there was a Slaughtered Lamb, which is right out of American Werewolf in London. I remember
Yeah.
the Jekyll and Hyde sort of restaurant bar, which was very like Explorers Club. Like it was just
Mm-hmm.
like here's a canoe on the ceiling, and here's like this shrunken head and this skeleton and this
Mars
like
2112, right?
yeah, like what if you went to Mars and also the future, but never went to either, and the food was really shitty. It was a bit of that. Um, so I remember like the Slaughtered Lamb was the most successful of them because it was just a pub that also had like a couple of werewolf heads on the wall, but it was like just enough to kind of get you into that vibe. Um, but and I always kind of I don't even know who the fuck would go to this, but I always loved the Tech Noir bar out of Terminator. which is
Oh my
basically
god.
just like, it's a fucking 80s bar that just plays sort of 80s music. But
So Jen, at the space that is Scum and Villainy now, she had designed the previous incarnation of that bar, which was kind of a rock and roll bar. It was called Loaded, and half of the bar they expanded it, and they were gonna do a barcade, and they were like, what, which I can't say barcade because it's trademarked going back to that. So
mm,
they were going to do a arcade bar, and and the people who owned it asked Jen to pitch an idea, and she was going to call it Neon Noir, and it was going to
nice.
be that club full of arcade machines.
That's pretty sweet.
Didn't happen.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a good fucking litany of pop culture bars that would actually be pretty great. I mean, hell, there's a whole mess of them in the chat. The Roadhouse Bar, the Continental,
Mm-hmm.
Hotel Bar, the Titty Twister from Dusk Till
Oh, it'd
Dawn,
be
Prancing
incredible.
Pony, from Lord of the Rings. Um, all of that stuff would be cool. I mean, hell, Marion's Bar from Raiders, like in Tibet, would be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Um,
You couldn't
basically, as
do
long
that
as
in
there's
LA though, or in California. You can't have a new wood burning fireplace here. So it would,
really,
yeah, you can't. You cannot build a house with a wood burning fireplace anymore. You have to have a house that has one in order to use it.
ooh, you'd have to
So
have
you
a
couldn't
gas
do it here.
fireplace, right?
Yeah, and I guess you could set the curtains on fire, like if somebody ordered the right drink, you know, the tote drink or something like that. The curtains could catch on
Mhm.
fire.
Nice.
I'm sure you could
Good
ensure
question.
that. Next question, Reed Erickson. Uh, what nerd movie quote do you live by? I have mine. I've cheated though because I've had these questions up on my monitor for the last hour.
um, I think, I mean, I've used this probably more in the last 5 years than I've ever used it. Um, no, maybe more like 6 years. Um, but uh, but it's always a standby. It's always a favorite. But it's the like take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. Um, and the site being everything from a specific place to like the world at large. It has been a somewhat dispiriting, uh, you know, half decade of late. But yeah, no, that one from Aliens always, always finds a way into my dialogue slash every day.
I I am a little more optimistic than that. My quote since 1999 has always been a Qui-Gon Jinn quote, which is "Your focus determines your reality."
Mm,
And I always took that to mean if you uh, believe it and you work hard enough, you can do the thing. Um, and it's served me well in my life, and so that's the advice I always give everybody: is your focus determines your reality.
not bad. Not bad.
And last one, because I'm getting hollered at on my phone. Um, uh,
Where are you? You said this was going to be a short one.
yeah, Geek Renderer. Uh, Wondering what film you believe is the most perfectly made movie of all time.
Hmm. Um, Sadly, this answer will also be the same as my last answer, which is Aliens. Like, I think Aliens is perfect. I think Aliens achieves everything it sets out to achieve. I think the character story is incredibly rich and dense and simple and emotionally resonant and understandable. I think the action is just phenomenally well executed. I think the special effects remain fantastic. Like they really, really, really hold up. Even though, I mean, granted, there's like one rear projection shot that's a little bit dodgy. Um, but given that they made that movie for next to nothing, $60 million I think was the budget in that movie, and none of it feels shitty. It is the prototype, for almost every, like, I mean, granted, The Dirty Dozen kind of did it before here. It's a war movie. And so the war movie about the soldiers who show up thinking they know everything, who kind of begin to die one by one by one, leaving just like the lone survivor. I mean, Predator would do it a couple of years later. Um, but it's also a horror movie cliche of like Ripley is the final girl, and like everybody else who thought they knew everything fell by the wayside, even like the ally that she trusted who knew his shit, to the duplicitous, business guy, to the kind of braggart, jocks, like all of it. But um and yes, Jose Munster. There is a woman named Jeanette Goldstein who's playing Vasquez. Yes. But I do I do grade on a temporal curve in that while that was never great, there is a long history of Hollywood of white people playing brown people. Um, and Hollywood was never incentivized for that not to happen as recently as, like, I don't know, 2005, 2006, when Angelina Jolie is playing like a Chilean woman. Like, yeah, all right, sure, I guess. Um, but no, I think Aliens is I think it's James Cameron's best movie. I think it might be the best action movie ever made. Um, and I think it is perfect. Um, as always, your mileage may vary, but I've seen that movie like 70 times, conservatively speaking, and have yet to find a bug that isn't also a feature.
I have two. I have
Mhm.
the one that everybody always says, and then I have another one. The one that everybody always says is Die Hard.
Mhm.
There is not a wasted frame in Die Hard. There's nothing in that movie that doesn't uh, subtly set something up that pays off huge later. Um, but my other one is The Karate Kid. If you go back and you watch Karate Kid, similarly to Die Hard, there is not a wasted scene in that movie. And the example I always give is um, the opening of that movie is very long, the opening title sequence. And it starts in New Jersey, and you follow this shitty station wagon all the way to Reseda. And what you don't realize that you're looking at that entire time is uh, is the shitty bicycle strapped to the roof, and that shitty bicycle is the thing that defines. He is all the cool kids have motorbikes. He has a pedal bike. The pedal bike is the thing that introduces him to Mr. Miyagi, who becomes his best friend, who also uh, teaches him and helps him grow, and is his avenue to his whole new life. Uh, that is how that movie starts, and everything in that movie is intentional and purposeful in the same way Die Hard is. So Karate Kid, I will say, is my perfect movie. Go back and rewatch it. You will be surprised at how fantastic it is. I'll also say, like, honorable mention, which is silly and it's cliche, but we don't get them anymore, is Pretty Woman. Go back and watch Pretty Woman. It is fucking phenomenal in the fact that it just does what it's trying to do expertly, and we don't get any good romantic comedies anymore that aren't just comedians improvising for hours on set that gets cut down by an editor into something that resembles a movie. Go back and watch Pretty Woman. That movie's fantastic as well.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that, like, yes, there's a bias for like the 80s and 90s for us because that's when we grew up. Um, and also they made a lot of different kinds of movies in the 80s and 90s that they would kind of stop making later on. Um, and so, like, yeah, romantic comedies existed, just straight up fucking theatrical comedies existed. Um, like mob movies existed and cowboy movies existed, like all of these various genres you could go see in a theater that can't do that anymore. Um, but also I think that there was a rigor to movies in the 80s and 90s. Like I will stand by like Midnight Run as just, and again, we are not, as Kevin likes to say, shining a light to cast aspersions anything else. Like, what do I think is the most perfect movie? It is mine, and it's Aliens, and I get it. There are scores of other great movies out there. That if a person was like, you know what, I think it's great, fucking LA Confidential. I could not poke a hole in that movie either.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't poke a hole in Raiders. Well, I have and did, but still, I love it. Um, I can't really poke a hole in like Beverly Hills Cop. I really can't poke a hole in When Harry Met Sally. I cannot poke a hole in fucking Ghostbusters. Like, all of those movies are great and phenomenal. And the ones that we love, like if you went back and watched like the movies that made us, to see how fraught those movies were and how much trauma they went through to get to the place where we love them, and how so easily it might have been a different movie, a worse movie. that, you know, that but for the grace of a handful of people who believed in it, or a handful of people who hated it in the process and like nudged it, and or hey, the casting for this was almost incredibly different, but we just lucked into Will Ferrell. Nobody wanted Will Ferrell for like Elf. They wanted Eddie Murphy to be in Ghostbusters and not Ernie Hudson. Like, Beverly Hills Cop was supposed to be a Stallone movie. Like, all of these things were like this close to being something different. um
Yeah, Back to
Cameron
the
almost got
Future
fired.
was Aaron
Yeah,
Stoltz movie.
totally. Like, Cameron almost got fired from Aliens like 4 different times because it was almost a crew revolt because they hated him. Like, all of these things are almost on the verge of never existing, but they do, and we sort of love it for that. But yeah, that was just my favorite. That's the one that comes to mind. That's one that always comes to mind. But yeah, Hollywood is littered with almost failures that turned out to be classics. Um, and similarly, like Pretty Woman, like if you read the versions of Pretty Woman that almost were,
Hmm.
the like super grim and gritty like prostitution drama that it almost was, that the first script is written as, that the right people came involved and changed it into the thing that we kind of know and love. But damn.
Yeah.
But good choices, everybody.
All right,
Good choice.
that's it. I have to go get my crying daughter out of the bathroom.
All right, you get your crying daughter out of the bathroom. That has been Black Man Beyond this week. I don't know when we're coming back. It might be when JC comes back from the Star Wars hotel. It might be sooner. We might get Kevin. We may not. It might not. Who knows? But hey, until then, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out on a Saturday night / evening / I don't know where you are. So whatever time it is there, Mazel Tov. Happy high holidays. Everybody be good, and we'll see you next time. So yeah, for Black Man Beyond this week, I'm Mark Bernard, and that's JC Reifenberg. Tune in next time, same black time, same black channel, smodcast.com or youtube.com/Kevin Smith. Peace, love, and soul, y'all.
Till next time.
This is the Cat. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the AKA Ask Kev Anything.
Every saga has a 10-year anniversary, ladies and gentlemen, and this is what happens when Jay and Silent Bob get old. I'm Kevin Smith. Cheers,